Discovered just under 100 years ago in the Valley of the Kings, the tomb of King Tut is one of the greatest archaeological discoveries of the modern era. The tomb of the Boy King is composed of 4 separate but conjoined areas and 1 passageway. These areas are the antechamber, the annex, the burial chamber, and the treasury room. We will be exploring each of these rooms and any significant artwork that accompanies them. The antechamber is the first room that can be seen when walking into King Tut's tomb. The antechamber contained items such as couches, chests, baskets, large statues, beds, and stools. There were roughly 700 objects that were cataloged and photographed by lead excavators Howard Carter and Harry Burton from this room alone. These objects were probably used by the pharaoh in his everyday life and were included to follow him into the afterlife. The most notable piece in this room is the golden throne of King Tutankhamun. Although it doesn't appear so, the throne is completely wooden with sheets of gold and silver overlaid. In it, Queen Ankhesenamun is seen rubbing King Tut with perfumed oil. The throne follows the Amarna artistic tradition developed under Akhenaten, worshipper of the sun disk god Aten. One of its most prominent features is the placement of Aten atop and center of the sea, with its life-giving rays extending his arms and hands down towards Tutankhamun and his queen. This is one place on the throne where nothing but pure, unadorned gold is used, since a deity as prominent as Aten would be represented whenever possible in the divine metal alone. If we look closely at the hands extending down from Aten, we can see that 2 of them hold the familiar symbol of the Ankh at the nostrils of King Tut and his queen. In ancient Egypt, the Ankh represented eternal life, and so the implication is that the king and his queen are presented with divine life. Although the scene embraces the beliefs of the Amarna period, there are also aspects of the traditional Egyptian style, like the representation of the human body. During the Amarna period, the body was not idealized, but instead depicted in a realistic sense. There are visible signs of age on the bodies of the Amarna period, as well as accurate body shapes instead of the ruler straight traditional bodies like those of King Tutankhamun and Ankhesenamun in the scene. Also, there is an abundance of blue and red on the throne. Both red and blue usually symbolize life and may be used to represent Tut's everlasting life to come. Blue is also representative of rebirth, and may be used to celebrate Tut's rebirth in the afterlife after living such a short time on Earth. Branching off from the antechamber is the annex, the smallest room of the tomb. The annex consisted of items such as oils, foods, wines, pottery, dishes, stools, games, and baskets. But there are not many significant pieces of artwork located in this room. It was difficult to examine and record the various items in the room because it is believed to have been robbed not once, but twice. The robberies had left it in complete disarray. The next room is the burial room, where the mummified corpse of King Tut rests. In the center of the burial room, King Tut lays, finely decorated in his sarcophagus. The 4 walls of the room each represent different scenes, with King Tut as the central figure of each. On the east wall, King Tut is being carried to his tomb by various mourners, most of them officials of Upper and Lower Egypt. His body is being slid across the ground on his ship, which has been anchored on the sled with a canopy. The purpose of the canopy is to shelter and protect the mummified body within. The bodies of the individuals in the scene have returned back to their idealized form rather than that of the Amarna period. The bodies are straight and thin and show no deviation from each other. The face of each person is at a traditional side view, with only half the face and 1 eye showing. Each figure is clothed in white garments, which is recognized as a sacred color to Egyptians. This color was usually reserved for funerary processions and was especially utilized in King Tut's, as it also represents power and greatness, both of which were supposed to follow him into the afterlife. The west wall is comprised of magical texts taken from the Anduat, the royal funerary book. This specific text details Tutankhamun's journey through the underworld. The Amduat is the oldest of all funerary texts and provides a glimpse into the burial procession of Egyptians. It details the sun god's journey through the 12 divisions of the underworld, starting in the west and ending with the newborn sun in the east. The 12 divisions of the Amduat correspond to the 12 hours of the night, and also coincide with images of the 12 baboons on the wall. Also displayed is the solar bark, a massive ship dedicated to the sun god Ra. The Egyptians believed that you reached the afterlife only by boat, so it makes sense that Tut received the finest ship built. In the boat is a beetle, which is representative of the heavenly cycle of death and of the idea of rebirth or regeneration in the afterlife. Also in the boat are two different forms of Osiris, the god of the afterlife. This could be showing the importance of Tut by having not one, but two forms of the god escorting him into the afterlife. On the south wall, King Tut is accompanied by Anubis as he appears before Nekhbet, the embodiment of Hathor, who is the patron goddess of Upper Egypt and the personification of the south. She is known as one of the two ladies of the pharaoh, whose personal job was to protect the pharaoh. Both Anubis and Hathor are welcoming Tut into the underworld. Tut is placed in the center, showing his importance and maybe equal standing with the gods. In Anubis and Hathor's hands are ankhs, which symbolize life. They are probably holding these to represent Tut's eternal life in the underworld. This is the first depiction of Tut partially unclothed and without a traditional crown symbolizing his royal status. He is wearing a white headdress though, which symbolizes divine and absolute power. Out of all the walls, the north wall is the most elaborate. In it, there are 3 separate scenes. In the first scene, Tut is depicted as Osiris. Tut's successor, A, is dressed as a priest in leopard skin and is performing the opening of the mouth ceremony before the mummy during Tutankhamun's funeral. Egyptians believe that in order for a person's soul to survive in the afterlife, it would need to have food and water, so the opening of the mouth ritual was performed so that the person who died could eat and drink again in the afterlife. Tut is also wearing the double crown with the uraeus complete with the flail and crook regalia. He is clothed completely in white, including his crown, which displays his nobility and authority in both life and the afterlife. The second scene depicts Tut entering the realm of the gods in the afterlife and being welcomed there by the sky goddess Nuit, mother of Osiris. In her hands, Nuit is holding symbols of welcoming toward King Tut and also symbols of reassurance that the afterlife will be kind toward him. In this scene, Tut is depicted as a young and virile boy, rather than in his typical funerary wear. He is also holding an ankh, which represents the life within him and the strength from that life persisting in the afterlife. In the final scene, Tut is pictured with Osiris and his Ka. He is again clothed in regal white and is probably about to undertake his journey through the 12 stages of the underworld. Tut is being intimately embraced by Osiris, who is then embraced by his Ka. Above his Ka is a depiction of a falcon and a cow. The falcon symbolizes Horus, who represents power and quintessence, and the cow represents Hathor, who welcomes the dead into the underworld to begin their journey. This shows the transition of Tut from his earthly form and into his Ka, who has already been welcomed into the afterlife by the gods. There is also a slight deviation in the traditional representation of the body. These bodies resemble those of the Amarna period, with visible guts hanging out rather than a flat, smooth abdomen. Their musculature is not idealized, but rather depicted realistically. These 4 walls depict the escalation of Tutankhamun from his physical form to his spiritual Ka, and ultimately lead to his corpse in the center of the room. He has abandoned his physical shell and shed it to become his superior Ka. The artwork on the walls reflect a return to traditional Egyptian style and an abandonment of the Amarna period style and any belief that Akhenaten held about the sun god Aten. The only piece of art in this tomb that represents any type of Amarna style is the throne of King Tut. The wall paintings have figures with idealized body shapes and inaccurate proportions. Their torsos are flat and smooth, and they are depicted in a side view with one large eye on the side of their face and their body turned completely forward, with their feet facing outwards. King Tutankhamun began the disassembling of the Amarna artwork and other artifacts during the Amarna period, and later pharaohs continued to try and erase anything from the Amarna period to return back to traditional Egyptian styles. The final room in the tomb is the treasury room, which contained items such as shrines, chests, and boats. Interestingly, 2 baby bodies were found in there as well, which, according to DNA tests performed in 2010, are King Tut's 2 stillborn daughters and only offspring. Most notable in this room is the statue of the god Anubis at the entrance of the treasury. It is carved from wood with a covering of black resin. The inside of the ears and collar are of gold leaf, and the eyes are inlaid with calcite and obsidian set into gold and nails of silver. This was probably in place to summon Anubis to guide Tut through the underworld and ensure his protection in the afterlife. A shrine was also found inside the room, which contained the 4 canopic jars of the king and representations of the 4 goddesses Selket, Isis, Nephthys, and Neith. It was of gilded wood, protected by a canopy also made of gilded wood, with sacred cobras and standing on a sled. The duty of these goddesses was to ward off evil and to protect the organs housed inside of the shrine forever. And with all of these artifacts, King Tut was eternally laid to rest. This masterfully decorated tomb served as his final resting place on Earth, until his rebirth in the afterlife.